implications for the wider game. To be clear, we're not party to the agreement, and while we absolutely welcome an end to the disruption in the men's professional game, there is a lot still to be understood. We will await the outcome with interest, but until then, we intend to focus on what we can control, which is staging our championship successfully, governing with the best interests of the game at heart, and doing all we can to get more people playing golf. At this point, I'd also like to send my very personal best wishes to Jay Monahan on his recovery, and I was particularly delighted when he messaged me to tell me that he was returning to work this week.
Qualifying places at future Live events.
Well, if you remember last year, I said very clearly two things, on this particular topic. I said, one, we're not banning anybody, and we haven't. And two is we will review our qualifications and exemptions. And that is exactly what we did. And we did two main things that ensured, in our opinion, that pathways to any players playing on Live or anywhere else in the world had a chance to qualify this week. And we gave 4 places into the championship to the Hong Kong Open on the Asian Tour, fully available to any player on Live to have played in. And a number of them did and tried to qualify. And we increased in final qualifying from 12 to 19 spots. If you have a look at the fields who made it to FQ, they were probably the strongest final qualifying fields of global players that we've had since we introduced the OQS system back in just before I joined. And we will continue to ensure that there are qualifications and exemptions available to ensure the best players in the world teed up in this championship. And I think we achieved that this year, and we'll continue to do that.
Just following up on Ahmad, I was at West Langston. Obviously, Sergio and other Live players did make the effort, but would a season-long qualification for Live not make it more sort of accessible to those players?
I think that's one of the options that we have, and it's not the option that is top of my list at the moment, but it'd be on one of the options that is available. But we're now, as you said, I welcomed the announcement on June 6th. I still welcome it. I think where we were last year in this room was extremely tense, and it's disappointing that for our game, the first championship to get to 150th, 2/3 of this meeting were focused on a topic which had nothing to do with the 150th. The disruption being caused by the game is not good for the sport. It was tearing the sport apart. And as importantly, I care about what the perception of this game is around the world. I don't want it to be perceived as a game that isn't available to everyone. It isn't available to boys, girls, men and women. And this constant discussion about money, which I referred to again last year, was, in my opinion, damaging the perception of our sport worldwide in the eyes of a number of young people who are saying, why do I want to join that? In the eyes of a number of politicians who help us put on these fantastic championships. And so we need to move beyond that, and that's why we welcomed the announcement. But as I said, it's not my deal. I'm not a party. I'm not at the table. But I am very pleased that they are sitting there and figuring it out, because long term, that's good for the sport, which we all want to either work in or enjoy.
Phil. The attempted disruption.
Thank you, Phil. I mean, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to be very cautious, and I'll explain why. We've had no direct intelligence. I think you're aware that there was direct intelligence last year, and most people in this room don't know that the Open was targeted last year. We have significant security procedures in place. We work clearly with the law enforcement agencies. And we'll wait and see what happens. You will have seen that we advise the players, please don't get involved. And I stand by that. We have enough things in place to be able to deal with it. Beyond that, I think security matters I need to keep confidential, and I hope you understand that. But I'm sure there's enough sentiment in what I just spoke for your question.
Here we go.
Martin, it's not my main question, but can you elaborate on the Open last year being targeted?
We had a very credible threat that came through was reported to us through journalists in this room who very kindly and responsibly as in the field was going to be targeted by an environmental activist. And that's all I really want to say, Martin.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that the course
week raised issues, trust issues about the leadership of the PGA Tour, this after the Senate hearing last week. What was your overall thoughts on what was said at the Senate hearing? And secondly, you speak about financial sustainability. That appears to be also an issue with the PGA Tour, because they spoke about the financial input of LIV and the money, the massive amounts of money that they're throwing at the game. Do you have concerns about that as well?
I think on the first part of your question, I'm not involved. I'm an outsider, a bit like you are. I sat and watched, and I find it very unfortunate that our great game was in that situation. And all credit, I think, goes to Jimmy and to Ron, the way they handled themselves, and I was very impressed and glad I wasn't sitting in their shoes. I do think that we have to have a sensible conversation about the long-term financial sustainability of golf, and that, as you say, came up over the last few months. I want to make sure that, there's two things. I want to make sure that we leave golf, when I've done my time, in a stronger position than it is. Stronger position for me is more people playing golf. There's 100 million people now play golf. Never happened before. Secondly, 60 million of those are outside the United States. And unless you go back to the 1800s, when Scotland was the world of golf, that's never happened before. That's a fantastic thing that people need to talk about. Far more. We now have 30 to 35% of people who play golf are women. That did not exist 10 years ago. So those two things I think are really important. And for us at the R&A, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And what pays for it is this championship. And the second phrase that I keep saying in my own mind, and it was a very wise man said to me, remember, Martin, you've only got that a job because some great person went before you, and you're standing on their shoulders, and make sure you hand that on. And I think every one of us who's working in the sport has a responsibility to think like that, including in the business side of professional golf. I think if I'm very open, Doug, we are and do and continue to talk to various potential sponsors. And I was interpreting the question about sponsors as a presenting sponsor. We're not changing from the Open. That's what I meant. We have a number of large corporate partners that help us make this thing happen. I think the world has changed in the last year. It's not just golf. You're seeing it in football. You're seeing it in F1. You're seeing it in cricket. And I'm sure tennis won't be that far behind. The world of sport has changed dramatically in the last 12 months. And it is not feasible for the R&A or golf to just ignore what is a societal change on a global basis. So we will be considering within all parameters that we look at all the options we have.